Join me in a minute of silence to give thanks for those who served and who sacrificed for others. And as we remember those who died in military service, we also pray for peace, for healing, in a world where fewer families experience the pain of war. Thank you. Jeff, if you would throw that first QR code up, please. I know some of you are a little older, a little slower. I'll give you a head start while I tell you a story. So yesterday, I'm driving home from church after the 11:45 service, and I find myself stopped at a traffic light, 2 or maybe 3 lanes over from this giant, gorgeous, white standard poodle sitting in the back of this late model Chevy Malibu with the window all the way down. So I did what I think all of us would do at this point after recognizing this gorgeous dog. I would bark, bark, bark. And just as soon as I got this dog's attention and we were about to initiate some sort of conversation interaction, the lady driving this car just rolled that window all the way up. It was darkly tinted. I couldn't see interact with the dog at all. And I was hurt, yo. I was crushed on the inside of my heart. So my question to you here, behind this QR code, if you would, humor me, is what was going on there? I have a few options that I'm going to present. One, that woman was mean, cold-hearted, dog selfish. All right, I think we're ready for the results page, if you would, Jeff. Well, okay, you guys are more kind, optimistic than myself, but I can see at least a few of you join me in judging this woman driving that car. Second, that woman, she had seriously misjudged my character. If only she had understood that I was a pastor, she would have more than likely offered to pull over so I could introduce myself and have some quality time with that beautiful dog. True. Come on, y'all, this one is clearly true. What is going on? Who were the 33 people on the bottom of this poll? 38, thank you very much, Lindsay, for correcting me there. 39, All right, the stories we tell ourselves. 3, that woman was justly concerned about the character of the guy with the scraggly beard barking out the window of his car at her dog and acted judiciously for everyone's safety. Really couldn't blame her if she called the police as well. Why y'all gotta agree with my wife? That's what I want to know. Last option. She was simply making sure that her dog didn't jump out of the car. After all, the dog was a standard poodle. False. The people who chose false are the ones who are like, no, dude, she didn't like you. That's what this was all about. Deeply suspicious of the dude in the scraggly beard. Right? So the stories we tell ourselves, they give meaning to the facts of our lives, and they determine the nature of our experience. More on that later. Tonight we talk about spiritual inventory, part 2. This is where Jeff has to hustle to get back to the slides. That's all right, I'm going to keep going, Jeff. You can just keep up with me. Principle 4, openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, to someone I trust. Happy are the pure in heart. Matthew 5:8. Step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And if you would, please read me Lamentations 3:40. Lamentations 3:40. Beautiful. Before we jump into our final set of inventory questions. Let me just try to encourage those of you who've got stuck or may be stuck in the future. Every inventory challenge I've encountered over the last 3 or 4 years I've had the privilege of doing this falls into one of these basic 4 categories. I made it too big. I didn't know how to start. I didn't know how to do it. I got discouraged. I didn't know when I was done or if I was ever going to get done. The answer to all 4 of those is surprisingly really similar. Keep in mind that inventory is not about proving how broken you are. Inventory is about discovering what God already knows, that God already knows everything about you and loves you anyway. And the goal is not self-condemnation. The goal of inventory is freedom. God's not asking you to be impressive. God is inviting you to tell the truth. So here's my encouragement. Get started, keep going, and at some point it's good enough to move on. Finish. You get to do another inventory later if you want. One tool, as you may probably know by now, that has helped me more than any other in getting unstuck and helping other people progress through their recovery is learning the difference between facts and stories. Facts are what happened. Stories are the meaning that we assign to what happened. Recovery, I would argue, is all about learning to tell stories that are aligned with truth, grace, and trust in God. So facts, only the things 100 competent observers would agree on pretty much 100% of the time. For example, as I was driving to Rancho Cucamonga this last Thursday, there was a car in the far left lane traveling 15 miles an hour below the posted speed limit, and I was running late to teach that afternoon. Those are facts. Stories then were everything else that started going off in my head right after I got stuck behind this car. They went something like this. Ah! Of course, today I would get stuck behind this oblivious idiot. I'm going to have to run from the parking lot to the front of the room when I finally get to this church in Rancho. It's going to be a mess. I'm going to be a mess, sweaty, disheveled, no time to practice. It's going to be a freaking disaster. Let's go, dude. You know better. You know you don't need to be in the left lane, but you are just so oblivious and self-absorbed, you couldn't possibly care less. You probably think you're on the road all by yourself. Maybe if I just drive 3 feet behind your bumper, you will figure it out, and we can all get to where we're going a little bit more quickly. So those stories in that moment for me and those stories for all of us, they determine how we experience life, right? Inventory is the process of discovering which of those stories are true, which stories are false, and which stories need to be rewritten in partnership with God. All right, so I didn't tailgate that guy. I reminded myself that there could be a dozen good reasons he might be distracted and driving slowly. I reminded myself that I was the one who chose to leave my house 45 minutes late. And I reminded myself that it's all grace. God's will was going to be manifest that day, whatever that might look like. God's in charge. I can trust God. I also would argue that this process is biblical. I might be stretching a little bit here, but I don't think so. I think it's biblical in the sense that the world offers up all kinds of stories for us to wrap around the events of our lives and give them meaning. But the Bible also reminds us, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what is God's will, God's good, pleasing, and perfect will. This distinction between facts and stories also sits right at the heart of our inventory process. We start by identifying facts. We talk about the person, whoever you resent, whoever you hurt. For me, it was that lady in the car with the poodle or the person on the freeway in front of me. From there, we go to the cause. List the specific the specific actions that someone did to hurt you or what you did to hurt someone else. We're being specific here. We're still listing facts. That woman rolled up her window. I'm still a little hurt as I think back about this interaction. I got to inventory this. That dude who was driving 15 miles an hour underneath the speed limit in the left lane. Then we go to the effect. The specific effect measurable, trackable, that specific action had on your life and or the other person's life. I couldn't interact with the dog anymore. I was slowed down for a period of time on the freeway. Facts so far if we're doing this right. Now we start exploring stories. The damage. Which of your or their basic instincts, which aspect of self or ego were injured here? Does it fall under the social category? Broken relationships, slander. Does it fall under the security category? Physical safety, financial loss. Does it fall into the sexual category? Abusive relationships or damaged inventory. This is where we start digging in, right? Uncovering the fear, the shame, the self-pity, the catastrophizing, the assumptions, the victim narratives, the resentment. Then, my part. What part did I play in creating and maintaining this resentment? These stories here in this section are great because they help us step out of denial, they help us step out of victimhood, they help us step into accountability. So here are some of the, the things I acknowledge that were my part in these resentments. Apparently, especially after seeing all of your answers here early that night, not everyone leans out the window of their car to bark at other dogs in traffic. That's weird. All right, thank you so much. I've got noted here, I was being weird at that stoplight. Okay, I can own that. I'm a weird dude. I left the house late. I was judging. I lost my patience. I catastrophized. And then finally, amends. To whom will you make your amends? What will you say? What new story of repentance and forgiveness will you allow God to write into your life? All right, so here we go. This week's questions to help you get started filling out that first column in your beginner's inventory. Starting with your mind. Oh, I'm doing pretty good on time. We may actually be able to go slow enough that you can fill some of these in. That would be super cool. But you've got the handout, so if I end up accelerating towards the end, know that you are free to do this work outside of this room as well. So, question number one. How have you guarded your mind in the past? What did you deny? What stories did you tell in order to keep your mind, your feelings, your ego, your self-image, your sex life, or your plans safe? And look, I understand that denial feels like it's helping in a lot of cases. It feels like it's allowing you to skip out on some pain and some suffering. And it feels like it protects us from pain. But denial always also insulates us from truth. It insulates us from transformation, and it keeps us from living out the freedom of a truly, fully authentic life. So I'll give you just a minute to think about what denial you've lived in, how you guarded your mind in the past, and who you hurt or who hurt you as a result of denial in life. It's always fun to judge the room and look and see who's got their eyes back up on the screen to kind of try and get an idea when I should move forward. It looks like we're ready for this next question. And again, we're not going to get all the work done here. Hopefully, if it's a good night, 2 or 3 of these questions trigger something for people in the room, and then you go home and over the course of the week you really dig in. Second question, have you filled your mind with hurtful and unhealthy movies, internet sites, television programs, magazines? Who here has looked at a magazine in the last 2 weeks? Physical magazine. Steve, there's not any surprise there, I guess, really.
Fiber Now.
2, a couple in the back. All right. What did you say? Fiber Now. That's Phil Carey. All right, great. Or books. Proverbs 15:14 from the New Living Translation says, "A wise person is hungry for truth, while a fool feeds on trash." Now, if I'm honest, and I try to be, I used to roll my eyes. I legitimately would roll my eyes at people who talked about giving up on social media or avoiding R-rated content. content. It felt overly pious to me. It felt overly dramatic. It felt like just that's a little too religious. But then I started noticing in my own life just how much judgment, fear, and resentment the news and political content were quietly pouring into my heart. It was not insignificant, you guys. I also began to recognize how images and ideas, these things were well short of pornography, were stirring up covetousness in me. They're stirring me to step into this fantasy world about how much better my life would be if I were paired with a better woman than my wife. And by the way, if you know my wife at all, you know that is a stone cold, stupid idea, because my wife is all things astounding and a perfect, wonderful match for me. I started to see how the media feeds us these absurd standards around body image, around masculinity, around femininity, and even what we should expect to accomplish in a day, a week, or a lifetime. And that proverb, it started to feel shockingly real inside my head. Now, I wasn't becoming an atheist, right? I wasn't walking away from Jesus. I was just growing a little more cynical, a little more fearful, a little more resentful, more days than not. So ask yourself, what relationships with yourself, with others, with God, have suffered in the course of your life as a result of indulging yourself with stories that made filling your mind with distracting garbage a good idea? I'll give us another minute or so there to process that. A quick point of clarity, because I acknowledge I'm talking about kind of a couple things at a time here. The stated goal for this session is to help you start brainstorming and filling in column 1. That's what we're trying to do here. Get names in there of people you have hurt, or people who have hurt you, people that you resent, or it could be organizations. That's the overt goal here. I'm also talking a lot about stories, because I think uncovering the stories is really ultimately going to be just as or even more helpful than getting those names in there, understanding what those stories are, because ultimately what we're really trying to do is rewrite those stories based on God's love, God's grace, God's truth, rather than the lies that the world makes so available to all around us. So both those things, jot down the names, but also what stories. Because what you'll find once you start to figure out those stories is the stories are producing names for column 1 in more than just one place. One poisonous story is going to set up a filter in your mind that can generate a lot of suffering, a lot of resentment, a lot of fear. Right, number 3. Have you failed to concentrate on the positive truths of the Bible? Psalm 119 verse 32 says, I run in the path of your commands, for you have broadened my understanding. Soak in that for just a couple seconds. Man, what a vision. Running along the path of God's commands. Joyful obedience. Intentional dependence. Ay. So let me ask, where have you instead perpetuated the delusions of control and separation from God and other people by indulging this fascination with negativity, this fascination with sin, whether it's in your own life or in the lives of the people around you? Where have you indulged this fascination in negativity or sin? Or maybe when have you read the Bible as a rule book to enhance your ability to judge what other people should and shouldn't be doing? Or here's the last one. Have you ever stopped at reading the Bible and failed to convert what you learned into action? So we'll take a minute there. Where have you focused on negativity or sin, yours or someone else's? Where have you read the Bible as a rule book to help you judge other people? Where have you failed to convert what you've read into what you do and who you are? All right, next category. Your body. In what ways have you mistreated your body? There's much laughter in the room. Now hear this, the question isn't simply what did I do to my body? But again, what stories made those choices seem appropriate or necessary? Tell me if any of these ring a bell for you. I need something to take the edge off. That's a story. I can't handle my feelings without some kind of help, not from God or your community, but from something in your body. Food is my comfort. I need something to fill this emptiness. Relevant to pornography or promiscuity, I need to be desired in order to be a valuable person. Sex is how I get love from other people. Rest is lazy. I can't stop or everything will fall apart. That one hits home for a few people in this room, right? Especially those of us leading ministries. My value comes from my productivity. If I work hard enough, I'll finally be enough. Right? These stories drive us towards chemicals, towards food, towards sex as a substitute for love and a source of numbing. They drive us to not sleep enough, to avoid resting because we're striving and doing, to work and work and work and work and work. So who did you hurt, or who do you resent, or who has hurt you as a result of contaminating your body with too much or the wrong kind of chemicals, food, sex, rest, work? Which of those stories is true for you? This next one is a pretty good corollary. What activities or habits caused harm to your physical health? Who did you hurt, or who hurt you because you ended up a slave to your desires or to theirs? You know, what's interesting is I know that no one in here is ever going to mistake me for a professional bodybuilder or a fitness nut. But there's definitely been times in my life where my fitness regime became an idol for me, where I had to stop and back off and just take a break. So it's not just those of us with bodies showing the evidence of our abuse, but some of us walking around here with really Fit bodies. Who can ask that question? I'm not saying that everyone who's a gym rat is unhealthy about it. I think probably most people are healthy, but you're not off the hook just because you look great in the mirror. All right, next category. Your family. Most of us learned our coping mechanisms, our shame triggers, our unhealthy patterns for dealing with conflict somewhere. Most likely in our family, our home of origin. That's why family inventory is important. So question number one, have you physically or emotionally mistreated anyone in your family? Here are some of the stories that may sound familiar to you. If I don't control people, things are going to fall apart around here. I'm angry, but that's justified anger because I've been hurt. Nobody listens unless I get loud. If they really loved me, they would know what I need. Oh, that's a trap. Making them feel bad will motivate them to change. Oh my gosh. A couple of these are just right out of my parenting playbook with my first child. Whew. I have to protect myself by keeping other people off balance. This next one is just universal. Being vulnerable is dangerous. Yeah, it is. Do it anyway. That's the point. If I admit I'm wrong, I'll lose power. Anyone in the room wrestle for control in this way? The best defense is to strike first. So who hurt you? Who have you hurt as a result of emotional mistreatment? This includes outward expressions of rage, along with passive aggressive behavior, attention seeking, and the subtle destruction of other people's self-image and confidence using sarcasm. I'm going to accelerate a little bit here. Against whom in your family do you have a resentment? Look, I am called to love everyone. It's part of the Christian gig. It's part of the pastor deal. It's just something I believe at the core of my theology exists that calling to love everyone. But understand that I do not feel any compulsion to like everyone. That's a completely different reality. This is especially true of self-appointed victims. Those people who soak in self-pity, especially the ones who then get angry with the world around them for not taking better care of them and making them feel better. I've got no interest in liking those people. I'll love them, but not like them. Now, our neighbors to the south of us have this huge mulberry tree. Look at the size of that sucker. Wow. It's gorgeous. This next picture is from underneath it, right? Huge. That's from like in the middle of the north side of my backyard. That tree dumps a ton of shade in our yard and a ton of leaves, and they get right in my pool. Now, on the other side, on the south side of my yard, we've got this huge towering, it's literally like 2.5-story wall of flowering oleanders that runs the entire length of that side of our north side of our yard. My wife loves these unkempt, running riot, huge, bushy. It makes her cry whenever I trim them, so I don't trim them. They stay big and bushy. They provide a great privacy barrier between our yard and the neighbors, and they dump a ton of expired flowers every spring. Now, as my father taught me, I take full responsibility for my own yard. I have never, I will never, I could never dream of asking, let alone telling, my southern neighbor to clean up my yard for me or how to trim their mulberry trees. Concept doesn't exist in my mind. My northern neighbor, who moved in approximately 30 years after the oleanders were planted, reaches out to me every year about the overwhelming mess my oleanders make in her yard. She doesn't ask nicely. She tells me I need to trim my oleanders and clean up the mess out of her yard. So what stories are you telling right now about me, my father, either one of my neighbors, to give those facts meaning? Or what stories do you imagine that I'm telling? Here's the thing. I used to have this same annual conversation with her husband until last year when she became a widow. That's great, Jeff. Thank you very much for that little reminder there. Would you like me to read that to the crowd? Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Yeah, I've got a little bit of conviction there, right? So does that change any of your stories, knowing that she's a widow, reading that piece of scripture? I tell you what, it invites me to try and think of some different stories than the ones that were running in my head, stories that honor my trust in God, stories that invite me to move towards grace, and to recognize the stories I've been telling myself. I was telling Steve on Sunday, I don't want to tell this story. I hate this story. Because this story's been a part of my life for like 7 years, 8 years. I have been in this trap, this cycle of resentment with my neighbors. Pray for me. I'm hoping this is the last year. I'm hoping I just go over there every month or so with my blower, blow my stuff out of her backyard and maybe some of her own stuff and just make it right. All right, point of clarity. The question actually asks about who in your family you resent, but I misread it the first time through, and I've sucked my whole family into this mess with me, and the story was too good to take out, so I just left it in. It doesn't relate to the question at all. Sorry about that. I'm not actually sorry at all. Number 3, to whom do you owe amends? For me, the people I hurt end up in column 1, and they get their own entry that is capped with written amends for my sponsored review as part of step 6. The step study material indicates that the people you hurt end up in column 5. Either one is great. And then finally, what family secret have you been denying? What is the elephant in the middle of your family's living room that no one talks about? The story that everyone perpetuates and gives power by ignoring it and the damage it does. Remember, Jeremiah 6:14 says you can't heal a wound by saying it's not there. So in this last row here, who have you hurt or who has hurt you in the service of maintaining this secret story? You're not even going to get a full minute on this one. Jason's about to come up. 30 seconds. Come on, Jason. As he's walking up, I'll just say in closing that inventory is not about proving how broken you are. It's about discovering that God already knows everything about you and loves you anyway. The goal is not self-condemnation. The goal is freedom. Thanks for letting me share.